A lot of times people get really worried about winning versus losing, and it's the wrong perspective. It's not about winning or losing. It's about winning or learning. If you don't win, you have a choice. You either lose, you lose the opportunity, or you learn and you get better.
You're listening to the Real Returns podcast, where we learn how real investments can make a real impact. Join your hosts, Andrew and Dan, as they share stories and interview business leaders on how real estate and other forms of investment can create meaningful change for individuals and communities around the world.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Real Returns podcast. I'm Andrew Reichert, your host. I've got my co-host with me, Dan, the funny man, Croce. Dan, what's happening over there with you today?
Oh man, what's happening? Well, I'm doing well, feeling good, excited to learn today on our recording from an interesting guest. But actually, Andrew, I have a crazy story for you. The other night, I was driving home after running some errands on 279. And I see a hitchhiker, and I don't usually do this, but I'm feeling generous and adventurous or whatever, and I let the guy in. We're making chit chat, and he says to me, "How do you know I'm not a serial killer?" I said, "Look, man, the probability of 2 serial killers in one car, that's like 1 in a million."
Did he immediately jump out of the car?
Yeah, he got freaked out. He got freaked out. But
Too funny. Well, I'm glad you're not actually a serial killer, else our business would not be doing so well. But speaking of business and doing well, super excited for Damion Lupo being on the show today. He's really a financial freedom guru. He's authored 12 money books. He hosts a podcast called the Financial Underdogs Podcast. He's built over 70 companies. Let that sink in, including one that we're going to talk about today, which is super fascinating. It's kind of a half a unicorn called FrameTech. Just came in valued at around $500 million. That's billion with a B. Can't wait to talk to Damion. Damion, thanks for being on the show. Could you just introduce yourself a little bit to our guests?
Absolutely. First off, thanks for having me. This is going to be super fun. I was once called a unicorn, and I was like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And so I think it's because as an entrepreneur, I have all this vision for wanting to solve problems. I've been doing this with all these companies for a long time. I actually started a company in college and got thrown out of college because my bookstore in my dorm room put the bookstore on campus out of business. So I couldn't help myself. I always had to solve problems that I saw, and it sometimes really pissed off the establishment, which is fine. That's what disruptors do, including what we're going to talk about a little bit with FrameTech. And so over the last 25 years, I've done a lot of different real estate ventures and had insurance companies and precious metals companies, wrote all these books, mostly because I wanted to figure out what I had just done wrong and then clarify it and maybe teach some other people, but definitely teach me what to not do in the future and how to do it right. Yeah. So it's really been this whole process of learning, stubbing my toes. 2008, I had this really exciting adventure called the Great Financial Reset and lost $25 million in 12 months, ended up homeless. And it was a really helpful part of the process. And what I've noticed is a lot of people don't really want to make the mistakes because they don't want the pain or the judgment. And that's why everything looks so easy and so fast, like an overnight success story. At the end of 25 years of all these mistakes, it's because you've grown on top of each of these things. And so that's what I've been doing for the last quarter century is building things and breaking myself down and getting to a place where it looks really easy, but I'm really bald and I'm really gray, and it's because of all the stuff that I went through. And I think that's part of the process.
Yeah, a lot of hard work and a lot of pain. It always looks easy from an outsider perspective, but I appreciate your vantage point on that.
So, Damion, you have now launched something that, from what you described to me and Andrew offline, was just an idea on a napkin only about 2 years ago. But tell us a little bit about FrameTech. What's the company? What's the narrative for, how you got to this concept, and what are you guys about?
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty cool, fascinating origin story, because about 3 years ago, I was working on a company I started 10 years ago called EQRP, serving people, helping them with their retirement accounts, breaking the financial bondage that they had by giving them options to invest their 401k and IRAs and real estate deals, stuff like the stuff that you guys do. And that was great. And then I thought, there's got to be more that we can do to serve these people and impact their lives in a deeper way. And so we spent a little bit of time looking at deals, brought a few deals to this community. And then a deal called FrameTech showed up. It wasn't called FrameTech. It was called a napkin with a bunch of scribbles. And we looked at it And we said, there's no way that this is real. This would literally transform the construction industry for all the framing, which there's a huge problem with because we have all these missing housing units. Nobody wants to swing hammers. It's a big mess in America. And so we looked at it after we ignored it for about 6 months. We looked at it, said, there's no way this is real. Ended up meeting with the people that had been in this industry since the 70s. And we realized, wow, over lunch, this is an amazing idea with the absolute right team. It's the right time. The problem is massive, and we want to be a part of it. So we said, we're in. The money you guys need, which at the time was $40 million for this plant, we said, we'll bring it in. And our community wants to be a part of this. We basically spoke on behalf of thousands of people and said, we're all in. And so we committed ourselves, put our reputation on the line. And we did that because we saw how big of a deal this would be to help solve the housing crisis. And so we committed to doing it for a few primary reasons. One, we saw that this would build a lot of housing. It would do it in a sustainable way. One of the really cool things about our process, and this is all patented now, the process of doing it. Normally a house has like 3 dumpsters full of waste when you build it, just from the wood and all the just the cuts that you end up throwing away, all these trees and the forests. Our process ends up reducing that by 99%. So we have like a little bag of sawdust. That by itself, you can imagine, is very good for the environment. It's also very good for the bottom line because you're not throwing away resources. So that was part of it. And then when we started looking at the efficiencies inside of our process, and I'll get into what we're actually doing, you realize, wow, you can go through an entire process of framing a house. Instead of it being 2 months, our process goes from plans to a framed house, custom house in 2 weeks. So we compress all these timelines and we give predictability to these developers and builders for apartments or houses. So they can actually say, okay, our electricians and plumbers are going to come right behind this particular date. And so there's no lag, there's no delay. And what we've done is we've vertically integrated the framing for houses and apartments and completely disrupting the industry at the same time while saving the environment, not killing a bunch of forests, and building a culture where people are valued. We're using robotics to take a lot of this stuff that hurts people in manufacturing and job sites. We're removing those elements. So like there's literally no stakeholder that doesn't win in this thing, which is why we get so excited. The mission is so impactful. It's not just about the money. The money ends up being this incredible side effect because of the impact.
Wow, that is amazing. So in these short 2 years, I mean, what have you guys actually done? I understand you got some facilities. I mean, how did you go about finding customers? What's the value proposition? So yeah, just kind of give us some of the meat on the story there.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, this was a Napkin. A year ago, we described it yesterday when we were at the plant. The whole field was basically muddy and we were pouring concrete in the middle of a hurricane in Arizona, which makes no sense, but that we actually have film of this. So that was kind of funny. And then a year later, we're sitting there, we've got our facility built. The machinery that we had custom made from Germany and Sweden is partially there, partially it's being delivered this summer. And so we've got a plant that has the power being turned on to a lot of our stuff next week. And so we're in a place where we're able to start producing literally this summer, which we're months ahead of schedule. And in terms of our customers there, are they coming, or like, what's that look like? Because people ask us all the time. And the answer is we've been buried since we even threw out the idea. We got some press with people saying, when can we start ordering? Today we're bidding and we're taking orders, and it looks like we're going to be, for 2025, we're going to be at capacity almost overnight, and we're going to be completely full. Before 2025 starts, we'll be full, and we'll be looking at a docket for 2026. That's how big this problem is, which is also interesting when people say, well, what about competition? I laugh. I'm like, bring it on. And it's not because I have an issue with competition or we're going to beat them. It's because we want all the cooperation from every possible company or idea that can help solve this thing. Even with 100 of these plants that were put on, if they were put on today, the problem doesn't get solved. So everything out there that helps to solve the housing crisis and helps to put people to work, and we're in favor of it. This is very cooperative because we're looking at a big problem that we need more people to help solve.
Wow, amazing. And so explain it to me like a third grader. What you guys do is you just provide the framing for construction projects. Is that right? So where does your scope kind of start and stop, and what you guys do?
Yes. So one of the things that we're very clear on in the beginning is that we have a niche and we have a lane. And so what we do is we do all the bones. It's all the wood. It's just for wood framing. That's 92% of houses and apartments in America. It's wood framed. And so we're in that space, and we take the plans from a builder, developer. We take those plans, convert them into our CAD, and then we push these plans into our automated system. And basically what happens is all of the wood that comes into our plant in these pallets is then offloaded and pushed through a system where we combine all of our boards together through a finger joiner system. And what that does is it allows us to almost have no waste. So we don't take a 14-foot stick or piece of wood and cut off 2 feet because we need a 12-foot. We literally just take all of our wood, so we can buy the cheapest wood at a certain quality and use that versus having to buy longer wood, which is always more expensive. And we go through this process, and then everything is built. All the pieces, all the floors, the walls, the trusses are built in the plant, and then our team goes out and puts them up. And so a developer no longer has to deal with the uncertainty or the chaos of trying to build a framed house in the field, which interestingly enough, some of the statistics are crazy. Like an average house loses a whole wall worth of wood to theft. And I'm thinking about that. I was like, that's insane. So no wonder there's all this additional expense. So we reduced all of that. We get wood at the best possible pricing in the market. We do this thing faster, which, speed, it matters because it costs money to have things delayed. So like we're doing that one thing, and everybody, inspectors, plumbers, developers, everybody is going, yes, yes, yes. In fact, one of the interesting things, you've got tailwinds when politicians like mayors literally are blowing down doors and cutting red tape. And instead of taking 6 weeks for a permit, it takes maybe 2 days. That's what's been happening because they know what the impact is. Hundreds of new jobs. We're going to be the biggest private employer in Central Arizona. So these are the kind of things that we need more of this in America. And I love it so much because it shows that it's not all doom and gloom and negativity. And like, if you start seeing things like this, maybe it'll inspire other people to do something where they're like, well, I was a little scared or freaked out of disrupting something, but hey, you know what? It actually can change the world when you go out there and put yourself in a vice.
Wow. That is so cool. I love that narrative. And yeah, you guys are clearly solving a problem, providing value. You even used the word yourself, impact, but I'd like to know, you've talked already about how this is a part of the solution to the housing crisis, about how this is actually good for the environment, it's more efficient. But generally, what are the ways in which you think about impact and the way that this particular business can have a positive impact for the world?
Well, when I think about impact, the question is, what is the impact? It's not just, impact doesn't mean positive. It's just like impact. You have impact when you build something. You have impact on an environment. You have impact on people that are building it, the people that are living in it. If you're building a toxic environment, what are all those things? So from the very beginning, we asked the questions, how can we be the best in the world and be a model for construction and for really everything, building a culture? So our plant is going to be almost zero energy consumption because we have solar that's going to make us either LEEDs gold or LEEDs platinum. So there's like virtually no VOCs in our entire plant. And all this construction is being powered by the sun. We've got things like that going on. We're doing some unique things. Like we're building not only a cafeteria for our people next door on our land, but we're building a daycare center so blue collar workers can be close to their kids. So like when we think about impact, we're thinking about all the people that are a part of this, that are impacted by this thing. How can we make their lives better? How can we serve them? And what's interesting, most people look at things like win, lose. It's very Wall Streety. Like if I'm going to win, you're going to lose. And we look at this going, everybody's got to win here. The only ones that are going to lose are people that are digging their heels in and saying, we're not going to innovate and we don't want to change. And that's okay because we're pushing into the future, not living in the past. So it's really asking, what are the impacts and how do we put ourselves on the right side of those from our perspective, our value system, and make sure that we're not violating integrity or morals or ethics. And so everybody comes in and says, we want to be a part of this. In fact, we insist on being a part of this because this is exactly who we are. And that's why people lined up to invest in this, that they said, this is the kind of thing that we want to be a part of. It's not just for money. The money, again, is a side effect of the massive positive impact on every part. The communities that are coming to us, offering us economic development money, millions of dollars from all over the country, they're saying, we love what you're doing. We love how you think about all the stakeholders, everybody in this thing. And they're saying, please bring this to our community. That doesn't happen if you have a crappy project or if you have a bad culture or if you're destroying the environment with toxic sludge. Like you have to be doing it all right. And so that's the validation from the market. We're getting that and it's overloading us, which is a really good problem to have.
Yeah. Damion, it's fascinating. I love your answer to the impact question, primarily because I love how you think outside of the box. All the way to daycares for your blue collar workers. And you're just such a visionary. You're thinking about impact in a multifaceted way. I'd like to also talk about investing. So Dan and I are professional investors. I would think you as an entrepreneur, think of yourself often as an investor as well. You've clearly invested in this business. Can you talk about the investing side of what you do? You obviously, need to raise capital for these initiatives. Capital fuels the work that you do. Can you just talk about that side of the business?
Yeah, it's really interesting because one of the questions that has come up is, well, why didn't somebody else do this? And there's a couple of reasons. One, a lot of people have ideas, but they don't have 40, 50, $100 million lying around. And most people they just don't invest that kind of money in napkins. So the way I look at investing is I look at, the people that are involved in the investment. So the way I invest my money, I invest in the people, and then they're going to make the thing happen. And like in this particular deal, I have millions of my own dollars in this project. And so I invest in things that I can impact with my time, my energy, my background, and my dollars. One of my dear friends that's the way he does it. He's going to participate in this, he and his wife, and they're doing the same thing. They're thinking about how can they add value in addition to their dollars. And so when we approached this deal and shared this with our community, the people that are part of our community that said, yeah, they put their hands up and they poured tens of millions of dollars into this, we all looked at this and said, all right, this is a deal that makes sense with winners, and there's an asymmetric opportunity upside. There's a risk. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, especially when you have a napkin that you say is going to be worth $2 billion. People go, sounds like a good idea, but are you guys full of crap? And so, I mean, that's a good question. And so, quite honestly, most people that have a napkin that they say is going to turn into a unicorn are full of crap. They've never done it. They have no idea what they're doing, but they have a good pitch. And so we looked at this thing and said, all right, one, is this a big enough deal for us to go all in on? Or unfortunately, a lot of times people just look at their opportunities and they say, okay, I'm going to dabble in this and dabble in that. We've gone all in. Everybody's all in. And so you've got all these people that are just laser focused and everybody feels it. So they say, okay, we had people after one webinar, we had a guy that texted us and said, I'm in for 500. And I was like, who is this person? I've never heard of this person. And he was in for 500,000. He wired the money 2 days later. And I went, wow. And it was because people had watched us and they'd paid attention, and they know that it's not talk, it's action. They've seen it, they know it, they feel it, they trust it. So as an investor, that's what I'm investing in. I don't really care what the upside is. If I don't trust somebody, I'm just out. And I also, like, people go, well, what are the returns compared to other things? And I was like, look, if you want straight cash flow, that strip clubs are great. But there's a moral problem for me. So I look at things and I say, is this doing good? Like, is everybody winning? And that's how I invest. Making money to me, and this may sound arrogant, but it's easy once you've learned how to lose money and make money and spent years doing it. It's not just about the money. I think you want to be proud of the things that you're doing and being able to tell your kids, this is what we're invested in. And being able, like, our investors flew out, about 100 of them flew out a couple of weeks ago to Arizona, and we got to take people's families through the plant and show them what they were doing to help really fix a lot of the problem in society. And I mean, people were like, they were emotional. And that's how I look at investing. Is this something where I can get emotional and other people are going to be emotional? And it also has incredible upside. Taking something, this first plant will take about 65 million because we expanded it from the original 40. That 65 million will end up being worth somewhere between 6 and 700 million. So the two plants are about 2 billion. And so people say, okay, this is a massive upside, and we're not damaging anything in the process. Like, we're not becoming a defense contractor that's going to go end up blowing things up to make a bunch of money. Like, this is actually helping society. So that's how I look at investing. Is this going to help society, or is it just going to help Damion? I was good at helping Damion 20 years ago. That was what I was focusing on. How do I make more money? When I stopped doing that and I started focusing on how do I serve more people, the money started flooding in. And that was the huge shift.
Wow. That's a beautiful paradigm that you just described. I'm going to have to veer us off course here just for a brief moment. My wife and I went to see Fall Guy, the new Ryan Gosling movie, in the movies last week. I hadn't been to a movie in a long time. And he gets drugged in this one scene. And he asks someone, how will I know that the drugs have worn off? And the answer is when you stop seeing unicorns everywhere. And so for most of the rest of the movie, everywhere he looks, like there's like a couple unicorns in the background, and like, oh, he's still like feeling these drugs. But you keep referencing unicorns. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about this. All right, back on course now. Hey, so challenges. I'd like to know, in the story of FrameTech, I mean, it sounds awesome. You're doing amazing work. You've had great traction. Sounds like, your construction's gone well. Customers are ready. What's hard though? Nothing in life is extremely easy. So what are some of the roadblocks you've hit, and what are some of the challenges been in the story so far?
So there's this balance that you have to, when you do something that's big, there's a balance between letting so there's a split personality that happens with unicorns. There's the big vision, there's the 30,000 foot, very exciting. It's where you innovate and you dream. And then there's the practical, pragmatic reality of what you have to do on the ground. And the reason somebody called me a unicorn years ago was because I can bounce between those really, really easily and fast. And most people are really good at one or the other. And so one of the challenges is we started off with this idea and we thought it was going to be $40 million. And as we expanded, we're like, oh, we can do better. We can do more. We can be more efficient. We can expand the plant. Let's get more robots. And it turned into 65 million. So that's 25 million extra dollars. And we said, yeah, let's do that. Like on the fly. And it's because we understood the scope of what we were doing. It's not easy though, because then you have to go out to the market and say, hey, by the way, we need another 25 million. And so that can be challenging and pivoting when you realize, wow, the power company has issues and we've got to figure out how to have power generation before our solar comes into play. Like these are big problems. Like running, I don't know what it is, a freaking megawatt plant. Like the amount of power that you consume in a manufacturing plant is more than a house. So you can't just throw a little generator in the garage and you're good. Like it's a major thing. So these, like the money thing and being able to pivot, our original plan that we talked about was moving to Colorado and for our second location, and that completely pivoted to another one in Arizona. We tend to make decisions pretty quickly based on instinct. So the hard part isn't necessarily the decisions. The hard part was already done in the decades of experience that led to the place where we could make those decisions. So they're not really that hard. It's once you realize that you're going to make decisions and you're going to screw up, and then you know how to get up really quick and move through those. It's not all that challenging. One of the hardest parts though is the resiliency to keep going. When it's like there's a grind, like years of building something and everybody wants it to be online and you're just grinding away and then you have to wait. Like we have manufacturing that's happening with our equipment in Germany and Sweden, and we're dealing with international, like getting the equipment built over there and things like one of the most frustrating things with Europe is the whole continent takes the month of July, August off. Like there's this 4-week period where everybody disappears. And then you're like trying to get stuff done. You're like, well, should we go on vacation? Because nothing's happening. And so you're dealing with all these things. The bigger the thing is, the more complex the problems get. And a lot of it has to do with your ability to interact with people and be graceful and be candid. I was with Jack Welch years ago, and he said, the missing thing in business, in large part, is candor. People are not direct. They're not transparent. And it makes it really hard to get anything done because you're always guessing. Well, what are they thinking? What do they really want? That's been one of the things that's made this a lot easier between the financial team and the operators. Incredible transparency. There's nothing that we don't share with each other. And it's not like the CIA where you silo everything. Very open. That's very unusual because people are trying to, usually in business, people are trying to protect their fiefdom. And so we just went in. The biggest problem I think people have and they start off with is they have the wrong partners or they have the wrong team. And so everything is hard. When you have the right team, Stephen Covey was right when he wrote the book, The Speed of Trust, because business, when you have trust, goes so fast and things get done with such ease and grace that it's almost like you feel like something's wrong because it's so easy, but that's because you set the stage correctly. And so I would say there's a lot less problems than we would have had if we had even one person, because one person that's the wrong person becomes a cancer. And we've got these people that I can't even imagine this company, this organization working with that every single person that's in there. They're all the right people in the right seats. And that just, it changes everything. And I think most people don't realize that they have a problem with the wrong people, maybe in the wrong seats or the wrong people in general.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, it's what an interesting perspective to say that the challenges for the most part are things that are from the past 20 years. And now you have the luxury of being able to execute, having gathered all those experiences. So great. Andrew, I think I'll hand over to you here to head to the fun part for our lightning round.
Yeah, Damion, thanks so much for telling a bit of your story. It was fun to get to know you, what you've done professionally. Now just kind of want to get to know you as a person or on the human level. So first question I have for you is what's your biggest win? What's something you're super proud of in your life?
I think one of the biggest wins, in addition to becoming a black belt in martial arts and then doing that 3 other times and surviving all the blood and getting destroyed for decades, it was going through 2008, which was another black belt version. It's like a financial black belt, losing 25 million in 12 months, being homeless, that whole process, and then getting up again and not just sitting down. I don't think most people are willing to go back into the into the arena after they've had their butt handed to them. When you lose everything and you lose your girlfriend and your dog and your house and your credibility and like everything, your self-respect, that was a huge win to get through that, which was painful, a lot of work, and then come out and do something and understand that I was here for more than money. That was an incredible blessing and a huge win to show up today and go, wow, I actually went through that and used it as something that was really useful.
Yeah, wow. And I'm sure in some ways the experience in martial arts probably taught you the discipline to get back in the arena. Because like you said, it's, if we're not on the losing end of a match at some point, we're probably not in the right matches.
No, there's something about that. The winning thing, a lot of times people get really worried about winning versus losing. And it's the wrong perspective. It's not about winning or losing. It's about winning or learning. If you don't win, you have a choice. You either lose, you lose the opportunity, or you learn and you get better. And that's what I'm talking about with the last 25 years. All the things that didn't work, all of those companies that failed or I just put money into and got my butt handed to me there too, I learned something. And that's why this is an incredible thing that's happening, because all of us learned through all those things. We didn't look at them as losses. And so we're not afraid of what you would call losses. We all know that every time something doesn't work, it's an opportunity to learn and get better.
So good. Yeah, not winning and losing, it's winning and learning. How about your favorite movie?
It's funny because I have movies that I've watched 100 times, and then there's like movies that really touched me. And the funniest one, and I bring this up because I've probably watched it 100 times, is Bad Boys 2. And is it my favorite? I think I wanted to be Will Smith. So the funny part of that is during my heyday of thinking I was 10 feet tall, bulletproof, and like, God's gift to the planet back in the 2000s, I went out and bought the same Ferrari that Will Smith had in that movie. And, I had the same stuff, the suits and all that stuff. And I mean, my ego was so big and it was so funny to look back. I'm like, who the hell was that guy? So I think, I don't know if it's my favorite movie, but it sure was for a long time. And I tried to become the movie. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but there's probably some lessons in that.
Well, every time I think about my daughters getting older and eventually bringing home a boy, I think of Bad Boys 1 and the scene. I'm glad that you laughed because you clearly know the scene. So I'm definitely Will Smith in that. And yeah, we'll have to see who my friend ends up being. But anyway, favorite food?
It's avocado. And let me tell you one of the funny things about avocado. You can actually have this in every meal, even dessert. And it's because I learned how to make avocado pudding, which is cacao and avocado. And so you can have it. It's great in the morning on your cereal, which is interesting. And you can have it throughout the day as like a snack because it's great fuel. And then at night, it can be dessert too, and it helps you go to sleep with all the magnesium. It's like the perfect food. So truly, avocados like serve humanity in such an amazing way. At least for me, they're great.
Wow, the avocado pudding is just avocado and cacao?
It's avocado, cacao, and you put like cashew milk or your favorite nut milk or something, and maybe little dates. Yeah. And so it's like heaven. It's amazing.
That sounds incredible. I wrote it down. Cool. What's a current growth edge? Basically, what's a way in which you're trying to grow yourself personally or professionally?
I think personally and professionally growing is there's a stillness. I wrote about this in one of my books called Reinvented Life after the meltdown. And the end of the book, the last chapter was called Stillness. So it's this practice of stillness, finding ways to be still in life, and which is getting harder and harder. So that practice, going into the woods, I moved to an area where I have trails that go on for 100 miles right outside my back door. And so spending that time and developing a calmer sense of presence, and then doing that and being able to sit in a cold plunge and be present and not panic. There's an incredible growth trajectory when you start doing things that are so painful and you do them on purpose repeatedly. I don't know if that's crazy or if it's growth potential, but it's happening. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn from. Like Joe Rogan said that. He said, I get in my cold plunge every day because it's the hardest, most painful thing I'm going to do. Everything after that's easy. And if you can do that and you actually can do it and be calm, I think that there's a shift that happens in your spirit. So that's my process right now.
Damion, you're speaking my language. I do a cold plunge every morning. So, and I do it for that reason. Like people always say, why would you do that? Isn't that uncomfortable? And I'm like, yes, it is uncomfortable, and uncomfortable things happen in this life. So,
but if you can do that, if you do that first thing, you choose to do that most uncomfortable, painful thing.
Exactly.
After that, you're like, man, I already got in this thing that was like 38 degrees. Like, whatever, it's not going to hurt that much.
Oh, mine's 43 degrees. I'll have to see if I can crank it down. I'm intimidated now.
That's Joe Rogan. That's not me. Joe Rogan's
okay.
in the 30s. So I think things would start crystallizing at that point. Joe Rogan's an alien.
Yeah, I've heard there's no therapeutic benefit below 45 or whatever. But anyway,
Yeah.
what is some really good content you're taking in these days? Podcast, book, anything that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I listened to Tucker Carlson's long interviews, and I listened to Anthony Pompliano talking about the future of digital assets and things. I think both these guys are really, really curious, and I love listening to people that are curious. It has nothing to do with the politics anymore. To me, and quite frankly, most people that are super political are not that they're not very, very interesting to me. I love people that are just trying to figure things out. Joe Rogan's done a great job of that. I think being curious about everything and then studying it. So I love listening to those guys and who they bring on, and just Pomp's perspective every day, a few minutes of here's what's happening. And it really gives me a lot to think about. So instead of the noise, I feel like there's a lot of clarity between those two guys.
Awesome. Great suggestions. All right, last question. If folks want to connect with you, maybe they want to figure out about FrameTech, they want to get their house built using FrameTech, or they want to invest in FrameTech, or maybe they just want to follow your story. What's the best way to follow you?
The best thing to do is check out FrameTech.com, FrameTech.com, and visit there. The whole team is there. I'm there. You're going to find me. You're going to find all of us on LinkedIn talking about FrameTech. You're going to see it all over the place. So, but I think one of the cool things about checking it out, whether you're interested in investing or whatever it is, you're going to learn something. You're going to learn about what's possible. For a lot of people, I think we've been beaten down, or maybe we don't dream big enough. And what people are seeing here is potential and possibility and hope and a better future than the past. And so I think that it just helps you understand maybe something bigger than you currently have or see. And so I think it's a great learning tool for everybody, regardless of whether you do anything with it directly. It's just a useful model for humanity in a lot of ways.
So good. Well, it was great having you on the show. Super impressed and excited about the work that you're doing. I'm excited personally just to follow your story and to continue to watch what you're doing and the impact that you're having in this world. And just grateful for having you on the show and look forward to following along.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me. It's been really fun, and keep doing the work you're doing, because we do need more impact in the positive way. And it's clear you guys are in a very cool space helping to drive that.
Thanks, Damion.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Real Returns Podcast. We hope that you learned something new about how you can invest to make a lasting impact on those around you. Please be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave us a review, and share about us on social media. We hope you will join us for our next episode, where we will be continuing the conversation around impactful real estate investing.